Hi, welcome back to AATV Live. I'm your host, Tom Anvil Hibberd, on this lovely Wednesday. I would say lovely Wednesday. It looks like it's about to be a thunderstorm, so I warn you about the noise already. This is our new time, pretty much, of Wednesday, 7:30. Obviously, during the lockdown period, 5 o'clock was great because no one was at work. But now a lot of you are sadly having to travel back to work. We've decided to change the time. So, bit of admin. Obviously, the studio isn't really a studio. It's the garden room where me and my partner do our various part-time jobs. So there may well be some noise. I may get attacked by the greyhounds, who apparently are chasing cats outside, which is a little bit scary. Yeah, there they go. So today we're talking all about custom guns. So when we say custom guns, we're mainly talking about the exterior and fabricating guns. We're not necessarily talking about making super speedy gearboxes or any of that kind of shizwas and electronics and DSGs. So we may come back to that in just a minute. So I've got two guests today. They're both called Ben, which really doesn't help. So we've decided that Ben Webb is going to be called Webo for today. And I'd also like to introduce our other friend, Ben. How you doing, Ben?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Ben's a little nervous. It's his first time on stream, so say hi to Ben, everybody. Obviously, Webo's been on several times. He's now an old hand on AATV Live. He's almost a co-host.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're probably getting bored of me by now. It's been about a month, though. It's been about a month.
Has it? So, yeah, well, we tried to turn all the computers on today, and we had to update everything, which was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So let's just do a bit of introducing the guests while we're waiting for people to log on and join us on the stream. So a lot of you know Ben Webb. I probably don't need to really introduce you very much, Ben, unless you want to do a very quick introduction to yourself.
I don't know. I think I start making stuff up as I go along now. You know, kind of like used to be a spy, and I've enjoyed joining Tom over the whole lockdown quarantine process, as we've talked about all kinds of different subjects. Obviously, we are friends in real life, and we live in relatively close
with my whole eyes.
Yeah, relatively close proximity to each other, and when the opportunity presents itself, we do enjoy playing Airsoft a fair bit. And same goes with Ben as well. Actually, we did used to live in relatively close proximity and play Airsoft with each other quite a lot. We've kind of migrated in a westerly direction across the country, haven't we? So, yeah.
Ben, not Webo. This is going to I'm going to get really confused. So I apologise already. Do you want to give a little introduction to yourself and maybe your history and why you're into Airsoft?
Yeah, sure. I started airsofting about what age am I now? I'm 30. 17 years ago, I started airsofting when I was 15. I got my first AEG from John and Frank at Fire Support. Took it home to my mum, and she was not very pleased. I'll blame my dad for that. But since then, I got into airsoft because kind of like guns. I like paintballing and fancied something that was different.
Yeah.
So airsoft seemed to fit the bill there. I've always liked military history, that kind of thing. The military history aspect will probably creep up towards or further in our conversation as well. I've even had some jobs in the industry, like Webo has. And yourself. I worked for TLS Effects at one point, so making pyro and special effects and all that kind of jazz.
Cool.
And attending events and blowing stuff up for everybody's amusement and enjoyment. And it's kind of just petered off from being really heavily involved in it, where airsoft was like I did it for a job and I did it out of enjoyment. And now I'm a systems analyst in the NHS, and I do airsoft once in a blue moon. Whenever I've got a bit of free time, and not at all at the moment, just like everybody else. But yeah, looking forward to the first game back when it comes around, because it will.
Excellent. So let's just say hello to a few people in the chat who's here. Loads of people. Abid, Matt Bridge, Jamie Penny, Ben Webb. Ben Webb's in the chat, everyone.
Hey.
English Kiwi. English Kiwi's made a very good point. At some point, I need to get him on as well, and we have 3 Bens, and I really won't know what the hell's going on. Jaraga Airsoft. How you doing, George? Good to have you on, mate. Matt Lincoln, Mark Courier. Excellent. Okay, so again, today we're going to talk about custom guns. We're not going to be necessarily talking much about custom gearboxes, which I think a lot of people kind of think about when thinking about custom guns. So, although Webo, you, I believe you've got a DSG.
Yeah, it came in the post earlier on actually. I ordered it kind of on a whim whilst I was sitting around the other morning, and I thought, hey, I've not spent as much on crap this month as I usually have done. So I went looking for a DSG, and I got one from a shop called AK2M4, who sent it out bloody swiftly, which was quite nice, and for the princely sum of £1.50 postage. So I'm looking forward to lobbing this inside my small Evo, and probably really pissing everybody off.
Yep.
And then it turning into a load of metal swarf and such.
We have some bets in the comments about how many BBs Ben's going to get. Webo is going to get through with his DSG before the gearbox explodes.
We'll run a
He's going to
sweepstake.
plug it in and it's going to implode.
Should just be on fire straight away.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, aside from Ben's Speed Softer antics, Webo Speed Softer antics, we're talking about custom guns. Okay, we're not going to talk about gearboxes per se. We're going to talk about the exterior, and really we're going to dial down into the wheres and the whats and the why-fors. So I think we should probably start off by defining, not necessarily in the wider world, but defining for the purposes of this conversation, what a custom gun is. I mean, we're kind of just starting in the kind of warm-up chat. So who would like to lead me off with what they think a custom gun is in the terms of this conversation?
Go on, Ben.
I'll field that one first, yeah. To me, a custom gun is something that has required a bespoke amount of work to go into it. So, a lot of retailers sell, I mentioned it before, like custom Glocks, but they sell them by the truckload, and all they've got is like a red trigger or a ported slide or something like that.
And a lot of them are OEM as well, aren't they? So that's the way they come from the manufacturer.
They come from the manufacturer like that. I mean, I think it gets into a bit of a sticky situation. Well, you can kind of come unstuck because you can't apply the same rule to absolutely everything. It's like you said before, you've got that 653.
So I'll just fish it out for everyone. Everything falls over. No, that's a 723. See, I did say we'll just be sitting here saying numbers at each other for most of the live stream before we started. So this is my GMP 653, and what we were saying previously is this is all. There's been no fabricate. I've not fabricated anything. I've not made anything. I've not customized anything. But I have bolted a load of stuff together, which I had to source individually in order to make this. It's not a catalogue item. I don't know if GMP ever made a 653 anyway. But certainly it's.
I only ever saw the Seaver kit. And
yeah,
barrel.
It's certainly, this is one of the few guns I've ever really made from scratch in terms of just buying everything and sticking it all together and building it. And I really like it, partly because not many people have one, which is a bit one of those, things something we'll come on to in a bit, I guess, as well. So yeah, so that's I guess that's one aspect of it.
I suppose it's any gun that you can't buy off the shelf,
okay,
even if it has the word custom in the product name. It's not a custom gun.
Okay.
In my opinion, anyway. Your mileage may vary.
I think I'd happily agree with that. Webo, what would you define as a custom gun?
I can't disagree with what Ben said. The word custom gets thrown around almost as willy-nilly as pre-upgraded, which is a bit of a bugbear as well. It can surely those things are.
Careful, Ben's just killed himself.
But
sorry, I know that's a big bugbear of yours.
or LiPo Ready's another one as well. LiPo Ready's another great great phrase that's been thrown around.
It's meaningless.
Game changers, another one that gets thrown around quite a lot, but we'll leave that where it is. Chucking to, you can buy a lot of custom stuff. If it requires just a screwdriver or an Allen key to fit it on, is it really custom, or is that just following the instructions? That's just how you assemble it, isn't it? It's kind of like saying your IKEA furniture that comes with a couple of assembly options. Do you want this drawer to open in that way, or do you want the cupboard flap on? It's not really a custom kitchen, is it? It's that's just assembly options. And with guns being more and more modular these days, assembly options are rife. You get to build things in slightly different ways, and it doesn't make you a gunsmith to be able to follow those basic instructions. I don't know, some stuff can be kind of complicated to follow, and you can cock a few things up if you're not really careful. But yeah, that's the difference. If it can be detailed in an instruction manual, is it really custom? If it's extraneous to an instruction manual or documentation, that's a little bit more custom, isn't it? Maybe. You don't have to agree with me.
No, I think some of the stuff I've got doesn't come with instructions, which is thanks GMP. That's brilliant. Or the instructions you get bear absolutely no relation, or it says assemble sights, and you're like, great. Now I need to go and watch a 30-minute video on assembling M16A2 rear sights, then realise they've left 2 springs and three roll pins out, which you then need to find from Halfords.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah.
So at that point, that thing's damn well custom. I think another thing, and certainly the reason we've got Ben on, is about fabricating stuff and creating stuff from scratch, making something which isn't just buying some parts and strapping it together. It actually is designing, fabricating, making, and doing stuff. I've done a little bit of that with some stuff recently with my Black Hawk Down carbines, because I couldn't get an OpSync suppressor, so I ended up 3D printing one and adapting an FMA.
Yeah, I think they're one of those things that have gone so far out of fashion, Tom, that they might actually be coming back in fashion again.
I think I'm largely responsible for the resurgence in retro AR carbines in the UK at the moment.
You are pretty much working the Ned Flanders like sweater and polo neck combo right now.
Funny you should mention the Ops silencer and everything. I've actually had a bit of a hankering to make an SPR, a Mark 12 Mod 0.
It's exactly the same.
So we may have been speaking about this at length on Sunday.
I've got a bit of I've got an itch that needs scratched. Although I suppose I haven't technically finished. No, I have finished my last custom gun, which I'm looking at right now.
So,
but I do need to make, because I made a Mark 12 Mod 1 recoil, based on the Tokimura recoil system, and I followed Mr. Webb's Airsoft article that he did on it. So that was all done by myself. But I do want to make
more of a cataloguing of various different costly mistakes and how to hack things up with basic hand tools.
I did make a few refinements, but it worked all the same.
Well, a lot of those, even that's, I want to build an SPR or even a Mod 1 or a Mod 0. Just finding the parts now is really difficult. Yeah. Finding an SPR or a Mod 0 front end.
I've found is it Evike, however you want to pronounce it. I think it's Evike. They're my first protocol for kind of like semi-obscure parts, or there's another place, KY Airsoft, named because I think they lube your wallet so that you lose money quicker. They've got some really, really good things. They actually facilitated another one of my custom guns. And who else? KIC.com.
Right, well, down in a minute.
KIC Airsoft. They had some really obscure parts for Marussian M1 Garands, for example.
Come on to that in a
WGC always used to be really good.
Yeah.
What was it? War Game Company.
War Games Club.
WGC.
They're a nightmare. They really don't want to sell you anything either.
Yeah, I remember having to buy a couple of bits from them. to do. I think I actually bought a couple of bits from Wargame Club whilst I was building the SPR, if memory serves correctly. But there were some bits that now will be literally like hen's teeth, like the Ergo grip. And I know PTS sold a few under their banner for a short period of time. But like the Ergo AEG grip is like, if anybody can get hold of one of those, it's almost as bad as the Star Aries style Hogue rubberized grip. Those two grips are like, I think they're really, really common in the real steel world. They've actually been overlooked for some time.
Oh, I bought an Ergo for my gas blowback rifle like that.
A standard GBBR style one.
Yeah, so bought a real one, stuck up. I mean, GBBRs in some respects are an awful lot easier because you can fit a lot of real steel parts to them.
I did
you probably wander into. Sorry.
Oh, so I was going to say that I was looking at toying with the idea of making the Mod Zero out of a Marui, Z system M4 gas blowback. Do I want to? I'm going to shoot myself in the foot and say, do I want to have the inconsistency in a DMR with a gas weapon, knowing full well that the guns that I'm looking at right now that we're going to discuss
I'm waiting for Gaz
guns.
Perkins to pop up in the comments and start shouting at you.
Well, I don't think that there's anything fundamentally wrong with having a gas blowback DMR. I know for a fact, having owned one, that the KJ Works KCO2 carbine, the 1022 carbine, I turned that into an M1 carbine and used it as a DMR, and it was like, well, I hate to say it, but it was like a laser beam almost. Do you know what I mean? It swings and roundabouts. It depends what you do. There are so many extraneous factors that you've got to take into consideration that,
I will
it could have
give
just
that,
been a good day.
That Ruger 1022 gas blowback rifle a very, very glowing kind of report on it, because it's one of the gas blowback rifles I've used over the years that is actually really good. And I think part of the reason why it's really good is because it's only blowing chunks of metal backwards about the same as you'd find in most pistols. It's actually a really good design.
I was going to say that the bolt carrier mechanism in it is weighs about the same as a thimble. The gas isn't.
Yep.
Well, the physics of it, there isn't that much to go wrong because of the mass of the bolt. Anyway,
it's not far off the old MP9 gas blowback from the same manufacturer. The same supplier makes the MP9 submachine gun as well, and it's pretty much the same kind of size, same sort of mass going backwards and forwards. And that MP9 is actually really good as far as they go.
Okay.
The only downside to them is how hot they are.
Right, let's move on to the next kind of question for you guys, which is, why should someone make a custom gun, and then how would you start out?
Oh, shall I go with that one first?
Go on, Webo.
Yeah, you go for it.
So I'm not going to tell anybody why they should make a custom gun. I'm merely going to speculate as to why they would do. I don't think there's any. You don't need to tell somebody why to make a gun or why to buy a certain thing. However, I do think very, very, harking back to our first live streams we did, Tom, we were talking about like what is Airsoft and why do people enjoy it and what kind of buzz do you get out of it. You actually tend to have a lot more fun and a lot more valuable time. Your time spent playing Airsoft is a lot more valuable if you've put a lot into it. So it's one of the things that I've kind of, we discussed it in the past as well. Just dropping into a shop, buying an AEG off the shelf for 120 quid, getting your goggles, getting your boots, getting your gloves, getting your face mask and your BBs, and away you go. You rock up to a game and you're not necessarily that invested in it. You're not playing a part. There's no storyline. There's no, there's no depth to it. So for your first few games, running around with an off-the-shelf gun that you bought because you liked a certain picture of it, or you thought, hey, that's a really good price, or I can pick that up and give this Airsoft vibe a try. But I think one of the things that really sets Airsoft apart is your own investment into it and your own immersion into it.
Yeah.
And building a custom gun is a labour of such magnitude that you will owe it to yourself to put effort into creating that environment and that mood when you go to a game. And there's one kind of ideal situation that I can think of, is where everybody would go to an airsoft game that would all put that equal amount of labour of love into their loadout, their kit, their gun, and they would all respect the fact that everybody else had put that much time, effort, and money into it, and there would be just a real good vibe. Of course, it could work the opposite way around, and everybody would be like, "Fuck me, I've spent like £2,500 and 6 months building this gun, and you're not taking your hits." It could go that way, but the optimistic in me kind of thinks that if everybody had this level of investment into their hobby, everybody would be mutually respectful of everybody else's enjoyment of it. So maybe arguments wouldn't be such a big thing, and maybe people would be more interested in just chilling and enjoying what they'd put together and looking around them and thinking, wow, isn't this like immersive and amazing? Because again, we'll probably hark back to something we talked about like a month ago or something. Like those first early impressions of airsoft, the real ones that hit home and made you really enjoy this hobby, were sort of taking a moment to look to your left and right. And one of my favourites was crawling through the back end of Bolby Woods down to through these ferns after a really heavy summer rainstorm, like is probably going to fall down right now. And then the sun immediately came out. So this mist was lifting off of these ferns as we're all kitted up, slowly walking through, kind of spaced out, as this mist's coming off these ferns. And I had goosebumps for about 45 minutes after that. I was so buzzing, absolute adrenaline rush. I was like, this looks like a fucking film. It looks like a movie set. And like to film a war movie like that, it would have cost them thousands and thousands of pounds in smoke and stuff. I mean, Toasty, Ben, sorry, you'll be able to tell us that sort of smoke effect is not easy to achieve over such a widespread space. But it was just so atmospheric, and just like that was what really made airsoft a big vibe for me. And that is why I would implore people to spend the time to create something to capture the vibe they want to be part of. But honestly, individually, I think it's a little bit of a letdown sometimes when you rock up at a site. You get a lot of people come up and look to you, but the real value of it is if you could get a few people to actually build a similar thing, and then you've got at least like a little group of you that's hanging out doing the same thing. And the wonder and the true payback for spending all that time and effort is going to a game that is dominated by that theme, and that theme is what makes the game. That is why you're all going there, and you've all got the same kit, and you all put that effort in, and there it all comes and shines. You've got this stuff, you've all put the effort in, and it's like, wow, it looks so cool. You've got one of those, I've got one of these. We didn't just buy these off the shelf, and we've put all the time and effort in, and it just becomes something really special, like a production rather than a game.
Yeah,
we've talked a lot about experiences and immersion, and my airsoft. My airsoft these days has to be an experience, and having a firearm replica that suits that experience is now for me super important. That's more important to me than actually shooting the thing. Is having an object I can handle and hold and move with, which is what I'm supposed to have for that experience. Over to you, Ben. What do you think? So again, the question was, if you can remember, why should someone make a custom gun, and then how should you start out? So maybe do the first part.
Why should somebody? Because you have a burning desire to make one. I think that's your biggest obstacle to overcome is how much do I really want to build this thing, and how much money am I gonna throw at it before I call it quits?
Yeah.
So if you can answer, yep. Well, I mean, I want to build it. It fits in with what Webo's just said, as in, it goes towards the production value, I think, of the thing. So, it fits the kit that I'm working towards, me and my team or whoever, and I have the means at my disposal, then go for it. In order to answer the second part of how they should go about it, plan, because there's nothing worse than getting halfway through and thinking, shit, I didn't think of that, which almost happened to me on my other custom build when I didn't take into account the recoil assembly, which I overcame because it works. But yeah, if you've got a specific gun that you want to recreate, reference photos, like we were saying before about sourcing parts.
Yep.
If it's a real steel firearm, can you get the real steel parts for it? Obviously, we're restricted in this country. We can't have, pressure bearing parts and all that jazz, and quite a lot of parts aren't available from the States because of ITAR. I was taken aback when I was looking at BCM stocks. You can't even import BCM stocks now. They're subject to ITAR.
You can do some stuff through. I think you can do some stuff through like Brownells because they're a legit importer and everything else. But yeah,
I had a big old not conflab, but it was a big old to-ing and fro-ing with Numrich gun parts. I can't remember, they had another trading name. But anyway, big firearms parts supplier in the States, because I wanted some parts for an M1D sniper rifle. I wanted the telescope mount and the barrel bracket to mount the side mounted scope on. They said, no, we can't do that because it's a part of the firearm. So I said, okay, well, what about the scope itself? And they said, that's fine because it's an accessory, but the actual scope rings and the barrel thing were necessary for the M1 to be an M1D. So you can't actually have M1 like sights or butt plates or any of that kind of thing. They couldn't export it because it was a part of the firearm. It's different for backup iron sights and things like that on modern guns because they are an accessory. However, a stock, which we would class as an aftermarket accessory, is technically required for the functioning of the firearm, because how are you going to shoulder it?
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a minefield. My biggest advice to anybody wanting to make a custom gun is research and planning. Yeah,
because you could get halfway through, and then try and find that part which simply does not exist, or you just can't get your hands on, and then you're stuck, aren't you?
Yeah.
Can I just go back to my point about the experience and totally about planning and research? Like, if you are going to go to the effort of building something, there is a hell of a lot of cool. You're the first person to possibly have one of those guns, and it's going to be great. But you probably do want to have somewhere to use it, don't you? So maybe the planning and research part also encompasses looking for an event or group of people that you could then go and use that piece of equipment with. So you might spend a hell of a lot of time, and like Tom probably did it with an AR build of some sort. Like, I've built this AR that's kind of then ring fenced me out of the event that I wanted to go and use it at. So I put a lot of time and effort into building something that came 6 months after that particular setting. And I know that sounds really, really restrictive and very, very anal for Airsoft games, but that restrictiveness and kind of anally retentive nature is what makes these events worth their salt, So part of the research should also be, okay, so I've seen that gun that I really like. I've researched the depth of that gun and the different parts that have gone into that gun. But also part of it should probably be who used it, when they used it, why they used it. What else did they use alongside it? Were there only 2 of these per 400 people in that armed force? Were they very rare? A lot of people really like the idea of building, the HK G11?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a door handle. I'm not going to criticise people for that, but
Crouch space magic.
You buy one of those, kind of, what sort of event are you going to go and do with a G11?
HK testing range.
Yeah,
exactly. Like 2 ever got made into existence or something.
Concrete corridor. Sure, there you go.
Yeah, Ben Skinner will tell us exactly how many existed.
You could go to the moor and shoot it down those big concrete blast chambers.
Yeah, yep. And you're totally in an immersive environment there.
Absolutely perfect for that, for building a G11.
So
So there's some
you
guy.
might find disappointing to build one of those. Sorry.
I was just gonna. There's an interesting chat going on in the comments at the moment about 3D printing parts, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a bit. But certainly the rise of 3D printers has made, or desktop or home-based 3D printers in the last few years has made making things much easier. I've been mainly making things that are cylindrical, which is which makes life a lot easier when you're doing CAD. But also that's the way CAD was in the 90s. So and that's the stuff I'm making. It's all squares and cylinders. So that's great. But my personal love at the moment is, and probably always was because it was Black Hawk Down, the kind of late 80s 90s series of custom ARs and bits the guys strapped to them, because I love that make do and mend nature of strapping a Jubilee clipping a dive light to the bottom of an AR hand grip and all that sort of craziness.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to start. If anyone's not seen it, the Forgotten Weapons episode with Larry Vickers talking about his 723 with Ian is fantastic, and the fact they have like a dive light Jubilee clip to the bottom of their AR is fantastic. So I'm gonna
inside an inner tube as well.
Inside an inner tube. So I think I'm gonna quickly knock one of those up, one of the dive lights, and put it on the printer, and then because if I cover it in the inner tube, no one's gonna know the difference anyway. and then might even put a real torch inside it.
I was gonna say, why don't you just get a massive 3-cell mag light?
Oh, God.
I've got a couple of spares for you, Tom.
So it's just yes. So the rise of 3D printers is great, and they're also which made finding really obscure stuff a lot easier. Okay, I think that was really interesting. I can hear a wink, Will Greenwood in the background.
Yeah, he's getting enthusiastic.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This is more specifically for Webo, and we'll come on to Ben in a minute. So Ben, in a previous life, you made a whole series of custom things. How did you decide what to make for that? What was the kind of criteria that you went through?
A lot of the vibe was like, does this exist on the market? It's difficult because I'll be completely honest about the feature design process of working for that particular employer. A lot of it was, does it exist? Are people going to be interested in it? Am I actually interested in it? Because at the end of the day, you can only write something compelling if you're actually interested in it. So this is one of the things where a lot of people feel like reviews are like really forced. If you're not interested in it, it's really, really hard to be glowing about something. And a lot of the time, you're not really all that interested in it. So you do actually tend to be fairly impartial, because you couldn't give less of a shit, which is so I had to find something that I was actually interested in doing that would either be technically challenging enough to be trying to work out, like, can I work out how to make this into a real gun? Like, so the TM recoil whole kind of basis was a really good thing to start working with, because partly I thought just my luck would be, if I spend the time and effort in building this, TM will actually make one, because that's Sob's law, isn't it? You know, that was a pretty big kind of inspiration. If I spend my time making this, that will be Sod's law. They'll just announce one 2 days after it's finished. Second one was, can I be kind of first up there to make it? Because everybody wants to get a bit of a vibe, you know. And if this is in the days before Instagram was really big and influencers were really big, I was like, I really want to do something to kind of prove to people that it's worth spending the money on. There's something really interesting to look at. You know, if you're going to pick up a magazine after paying your hard-earned fiver, there wants to be something interesting in there. That's something that got harder and harder over time. But like the AK recoil, TM AK recoil, I was like, I know there's a way to fit a microswitch trigger, like a MOSFET, ASCU style thing, into a TM AK. And by fuck, it took a lot of dremeling and a lot of 10p, 5p, but I finally managed to fit one into the TM gun, and it meant cutting out chunks of the gearbox shell, cutting out bits of circuit board and things like that. But that meant I had this gate have come along and now made a Titan that will fit into that sort of gun straight away. But I could kind of enjoy the performance benefits in that platform of gun. And I got to admit that thing, the TM recoil, was barely held together by bits of threaded out metal and stuff by the end of it. And it shot really well still, because it was a pretty good design. I did actually sell that to somebody, and I did warn the guy explicitly that this thing's on its last legs. It will hold together if you don't try. And then he moaned at me because it was on its last legs when he finally got it. But finally, he did kind of see sense with that one. But yeah, so the decision process was basically, is this going to be interesting to look at? Is this going to possibly be the first that I've seen of? You know, can I take some good, clear photos and make a decent, clear guide of the kind of work that goes into building this, more as a cautionary tale to people that might venture into trying to make it, and also, will it be a cool thing to own afterwards? Because contrary to popular belief, I did end up paying for most of that stuff. Like 90% of that stuff was paid for out of my own pocket. Moreover, because I actually wanted to own it at the end of the whole process. It wasn't like I'd just go knocking on someone's door and say, "Can you give me one of these?" Like the guns I started with were a second-hand build. You know, the parts I got, you know, I got a bit of discount on them often, but I did buy them because I actually wanted them. And I guess that's another inspiration as well. Like I got a gun that was probably a little bit shaky, that needed a bit of work. Okay, I could restore this to factory, but then I might as well have just bought one at factory. So what can I make out of this cool thing? I've got these bits laying around. I know, Ben, you've kind of gone through a very opposite kind of angle on that. You set your sights on making something and you make it come true. You're so much more patient than I am when it comes to these things. Like, I think I've got like a 2-week build time, but I've known you to wait for parts for like 6 weeks before they've turned up and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've got more patience. I think I've just got a greater swearing vocabulary than you, so to fall back on. Well, if the parts aren't in stock, there's not a lot you can really do about that. You just got to wait, especially if you're waiting. Well, I ordered some parts just before we got into lockdown, I think. When did I order them? I think I ordered them back end of January, and I got them in April for my latest build. So yeah, just 2.5, 3 months maybe. I had to wait. Was it that long? Nah, it wasn't that long. Okay, it felt like that long.
I've currently got stuff on a boat from Taiwan.
I'm on a boat.
On a boat.
I think that there's another thing you have to look into, like the feasibility of something. Like, I would love to build. I don't know, what's the holy grail of guns that currently doesn't exist?
Fallschirmjäger 42.
Mine's gone completely blank of things that you would love to build that don't exist, because they just simply don't at the moment. You kind of have to do a bit of a sanity check, don't you? You have to go back through and think, right, do I have the capability to build this? Is this just a matter of buying a few bits that do need modifying and then I can assemble them? Or is this going to be one of those things that's like well out of scope, well out of capability?
See, I really want a TM recoil fixed carry handle gun.
Oh, I made one of those.
I know a man. This is my segue. But I know a man. But I know a man who's made one, Ben.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't actually take credit for the actual. Well, actually, I can and I can't. The first carry handle, fixed carry handle upper that I had was for my Colt 604, which was my Vietnam Navy SEALs. Well, it was for my Vietnam Navy SEALs inspired loadout, even down to the nice bright blue denim jeans. I got my TM recoil and I got a G&P M16A1. Oh no, actually it was their VN upper, and basically sent it off to a nice chap called Jim at LCS Engineering Outpost. Okay. Yeah.
This was years ago now, wasn't it?
Oh, it was years ago. Yeah, years ago. And he grafted he basically just did a cut and shot. He cut the carry handle off of the G&P upper and bolted it to the rest of the TM upper, and you can see the picture there. That's it. Currently, that was after my M16A1 build. Sorry, Colt 604 if we're going to be pedantic. And I modified myself a G&P M16 VN front end and the A1 stock. And then I sold those and decided I wanted to make an XM177E1. So you can see there that's the slab-sided upper and the full fence lower Colt 604. You know, kind of a mix between a US Air Force and US Navy. Yeah, and that's the full 604 with working short recoil magazines.
So did you have to cut that thing down?
Yeah, I think that the hardest bit of the build for me was actually getting the magazines to work.
Okay.
So I did how many magazines did I have, Webo? I think I did 8 or 9. I did 8 or 9 of them, and
Wow.
that was taking the internals out of the recoil mags, basically cutting them into thirds, chucking away the middle third and gluing them back together again, and then fitting them inside G&P 20 round style magazine shells and spacing them, getting the spacing so that they'd feed right. And all of them did activate the bolt stop on the last round. So I was quite happy with that. I think I've still got 2 or 3 of them somewhere in a bag, bottom of a cupboard or something.
I'm still amazed no one doesn't make an upper.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Just all I can live with an A2 lower.
Yeah.
But just having a fixed A1 upper. I don't know why Laylax or someone hasn't just done one.
No, I think Lilacs only seem to make is it the Viltor?
Yeah.
I think that's the only upper they make.
We're
The
starting
VLTOR one.
We're starting to see more retro ARs on the market. SEMA have just done theirs. JG have just released a new series as well. There's some more coming. So maybe, you never know. Marui probably won't make one because whatever design decisions Marui make is lost to no
What
one.
were we talking about on Sunday, Tom? We're probably a couple of beers deep at the point, but we're like, maybe TM are saving some sort of amazing technology to go inside this gun that's quite such a classic of airsoft. It's pretty much not just a classic of airsoft, but it's like a real kind of, it's a big part of firearms history and culture. And it's arguable that Vietnam films are still pretty much bigger than World War II films, and they've put a lot of production into them, and that seems to be kind of what keeps Marui ticking. There's like the movies. So maybe they are going to do the fixed carry handle, but maybe they're saving it for NGRS2 or something like next generation recoil system.
Do you think that could
maybe
be,
there's going to be something?
Do you think that could be because I thought that the next big thing was going to be the GBLFs?
Yeah,
is that right?
That's pretty cool. I mean, Tom was brave enough to venture that it might be some sort of solenoid powered system.
I've seen the patent.
Maybe in the future. Yeah,
Marui have got a patent on a electromagnetic gearbox solenoid based system. I think it's electromagnetic, like a railgun. Well, not railgun, but it uses magnets to fire the piston down the cylinder. So
do you think that could be coupled with a moving bolt carrier group?
Yep.
Like the GBLS.
Don't see why not.
Because I'm sure that I saw was it Real Sword? I'm sure years ago. This was at one of these shot show type things that you've been to, Webo.
BO manufacturer or Bomb or Black Ops manufacturer from France did actually promo a video that was made at some point a couple of years ago about using like a solenoid. It was like an electromagnetic
I remember that.
That instead of using gears, they actually used like a solenoid powered magnet, and they were like, coming in the new year, this is going to happen with this new technology that's going to change the face of airsoft and change the performance of all airsoft guns, and it just never came about.
I remember seeing that. I think they got slapped with Marui's patent lawyers. But well, I don't know anything about it. I've literally seen a patent. So yeah, we're talking about. I don't know why someone doesn't make one of those. But Ben, you have made some quite amazing. So those things are pretty awesome. But you've also made some other stuff which you can probably show on screen. And the main reason we've kind of got you on the show is to talk about your M1 Garand and your Gewehr 43. So let's have a chat about those and kind of how they came about and what madness led you down that path.
Well, I've like I said at the beginning when I introduced myself, I always liked military history, and I'm a World War II airsofter, so I'm not just a nerd, I'm a proper nerd. And I've got the, I suppose it's a bit of a cliche when you say a World War II airsofter goes down the the American Airborne, and I'm afraid to say I've got a 101st Airborne kit.
Wait for Gadge to come on and lambast you for going with the
I know.
going with that option.
I know. But it's because the M1 Garand I've always had a bit of a fascination with. I don't know why. It's got to be the ping. It's got to be the ping. Everybody goes on about the or is it, they say Garand, but there's an argument to say it's Garand. At least if you listen to Gun Jesus.
It's American. It's American, so it's probably pronounced wrongly anyway.
Oh, actually, John Garand was a Canadian.
Oh, it's probably even more wrong. It's probably got a bit of a French twang to it.
But yeah, I've always liked the M1, and I have owned 2 Marussian M1 Garands as well.
Yeah.
And that bloody French lizard camo, you and Jamie.
Oh yeah, I chased. I remember at Bulby chasing Gadge halfway across the site with that actually.
Many years
ago.
That's many probably 15 years ago now, isn't it?
It was 2009.
So I'm just
2009 that Vietnam event was.
I'm just going to chuck an image of your M1 on screen for everyone to have a look at.
I don't know if it's going to be any good.
Oh no, it looks pretty awesome to me.
Well, it came about because I kind of want something. I don't just want my airsoft guns to be sewing machines that chuck out plastic. I need to actually interact with the weapon system. So that means that's why I've always got TM recoils, because it's got a little bit of feedback from the gun. You know that you're you're shooting a toy gun, but it's got something there behind it. Also, there's a little bit. Yeah, it's touchy feely, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's got the bolt stop function as well, because you need something to tell you that the gun's not just shooting blanks. So that's kind of why I like being able to interact with my weapons.
Your pictures are going down well in the comments. Matt Bridge says spicy. Rickmate Stuff says there are rules about porn on YouTube,
Thank you guys. But so I haven't owned 2 Marussian M1 Garands, and they were both poo, even though I had Jim at LCS Engineering Outpost make me a new steel Part 45, which is the infamously crap piece. It's basically the main component in the bolt.
Right.
It's just crap. They make it out of plastic and it just shatters. It's just crap. And anyway, I've been talking to Webo about this project. I had been anyway for years. Can you turn a WE Tech M14 gas blowback into an M1 Garand?
So that's how it started.
Yeah.
I think almost as much poop time and sending text messages to each other transpired as it actually took to make the thing.
Yes, there was a lot of toilet talk.
Yeah.
And so I've got it here. You probably can't see it very well, but yeah, it's got a definite mix of parts in this thing, and it is CO2 powered.
Right.
So it is, needless to say, much more consistent than the normal WM14, which is green gas, unless you tap the magazine like a heathen and run it on HPA.
Max Hunt.
Anyway.
So I've got sorry Ben to jump in, but I've got to be honest. I've encountered custom guns before. I've encountered things that have been customized to that extent, and there's been a lot of bits bolted together. and a lot of bits threaded together and kind of hashed into a workable piece. I have to be, and I know Ben will be very, very modest about his capabilities, but I was really, really impressed. I got to get hands on with this probably a couple of months before Christmas, wasn't it? Not long after you just finished it, and when you were still brushing up a few details. And it's genuinely a very, very, very good piece of kit. Ben will be modest about it, but I want it to be known that it's very, very well put together and the details are very, very well thought out.
At some point, we'll get to Thurleston together and do a proper video on it. We've tried before and not managed it, but once things normalise a bit, we'll definitely get down there and get some video of it firing for everyone in high def.
For sure.
Thanks very much. Thanks for those kind words, Webo. And we definitely need to get on the range with it. It likes .32s.
Spicy sky raisins.
Spicy sky raisins, indeed. Yeah, the Germans didn't like it in that World War II event that I went to. They really didn't.
I think a lot of World War II stuff you buy isn't very good.
No, it's crap.
It's really not great. A lot of it, and it needs a lot of work. And most people don't have the technical ability to do, so it tend to have stuff which just doesn't work very well.
I think the latest offering recently, anyway, is Snow Wolf. I think brought out an MP18 or MP28, and the don't know what that was. Will in the background
again.
On something.
Sorry, we're picking up that again.
it's just the manufacturers, they go to all the effort and trouble of bringing something to production, and then they go ahead and use. It's probably to do with production costs. They use cheap wood for stock, and then they paint it some ghastly color of red, or something that looks utterly abominable. Just stain it.
Solidified honey is usually the kind of vibe, isn't it?
Oh yeah, just stain it.
It's like a lot of wood on Airsoft AKs. Most of it's horrible. Most of it's utterly horrible, and if you're really into it, it's a real bit of a deal breaker. But again, there's costs involved.
Yeah.
There's a reason a SEMA is 150 quid and an LCT is 300, and part of that is the laminated wood that they've put on it.
I think we've all seen a sketchy sten or a.
I've seen some very sketchy stens.
Sketchy stens and the German one as well that I can't remember the name of.
MP40.
Yeah, probably the MP40.
Well,
things with hop units that weren't even really together, So
yeah, you have to drill them. You have to drill them out, put a grub screw in, and then as your adjustable hop, and all sorts of craziness.
The AGM MP40,
is that the one with the switch on the bottom of the pistol grip?
Yeah, well, no, they've got a bloody fire selector on the side. MP40s were full auto only. and they put in a proprietary hop unit that's just CAC.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have modified them. In fact, I don't know a single person that's still got a stock hop unit in their MP40. They've all just switched them out for AK hop units.
Yeah, it was mostly bolted down so badly it shot out the front of the gun, along with the first couple of BBs.
So I think, going back to our previous point, why would you make a custom gun? Sometimes you just have to.
Yeah.
Or you certainly have to do some serious work to some of the stuff. You get into some of the really niche areas of Airsoft. A lot of the guns really aren't skirmish pieces. They're wall hangers and collectibles. They're really not really. You might plink a bit, and they're really intended to plink a bit in the back garden, but they're not really meant to be skirmished with.
I think to be fair though, that Webo said this before. Sorry, Webo, but realistically, a lot of airsoft guns aren't actually designed to be skirmished. They are designed for the Japanese market, where you just go into your back, I would say back garden, but I don't know how many Japanese people have got gardens, considering a lot of them live in big crowded cities. So wherever
go to the back shoebox.
wherever they are able to, they won't necessarily skirmish them. They are to be collected. So I don't know.
So
I don't know.
I've honestly noticed this. There's on YouTube there's a comment by a guy called Rick Makes Stuff. I don't know if you're more familiar with him, Tom. I've not caught up with him the last couple of streams.
I can see Rick makes stuff in the comments.
Why is it only the budget ACM companies that seem to make WW2 stuff?
Yeah.
And it's probably because there's not a huge market for them, to be honest. And also, like you said, is there any real expectation of it to work? So, and I'll have to kind of put my work hat on here a little bit. We've in the airsoft industry, and I'm sure there's quite a few retailers that will agree with me. Actually, airsoft's not been a thing for the last 3 months. However, the sale of airsoft equipment hasn't necessarily slowed down. So I think this idea that buying airsoft stuff because you go and play airsoft is maybe something that's self-perpetuating. And if we weren't bound by these VCRA rules, actually there'd be a healthy industry in buying airsoft replicas just because people wanted them. It's a bit of a kind of stretch from the original comment, but like you say, maybe they're made for markets abroad where people don't actually have big expectations of it shooting any BBs. They kind of just want to buy it for a toy to hang around with and to, oh, look at this. It looks like that thing from that film. How cool's that? And because they're not restricted in buying it because they're players, they don't have any expectations as a player.
That's a very good point.
As somebody that sells airsoft products, I believe that the UK is one of the most discerning countries, and possibly within Europe, where things we are players primarily. We have to be players to justify our purchases. I think that is a fairly unique legislation for the UK, but because of that, we kind of have a very, very high demand on airsoft products. Because for most of the people, they'll be like, brilliant, I bought this and it was cheap and I'm going to shoot it for a couple of weekends, and by the time the high cap runs out, they're bored of it and it goes in the cupboard and gets forgotten about for the rest of the time. Having been to the Czech Republic and things like that, there's still that mass market for airsoft guns is actually impulse buys as you walk past a kind of novelty beach, kind of city centre tourist attraction shop. Somebody picks something up. It's fun to tit around with for a weekend or two. Kids get bored of it. Battery gets dead. It goes in the cupboard. You can't facilitate that kind of market in the UK. So to buy an airsoft gun, you actually have to think about using it competitively. So that's I think why only budget ACM companies tend to make these World War II guns, because outside of the reenactment industry, World War II guns are the ones that you probably see in films up to the last few years ago. And I'm sure ACM companies are now, they've kind of been overtaken by other people making Call of Duty guns, and that's probably why. I think we've got a slightly skewed look at what's going on in the airsoft manufacturing industry, because everything has a bit of a delay on it. But we're looking at airsoft products that are hitting the market nowadays, and they're becoming less and less like real guns. And the guns that we're presented with in media are becoming less and less like real guns. So sci-fi films are pretty big. There hasn't been a big World War II film for a while. I was pretty buoyed by the fact that like 1917 and films of that ilk came out, because I thought, that might herald a new era of films that focus on real eras of history coming through. But that was an incredible piece of filmmaking. I really, really enjoyed that film, but it didn't inspire the resurgence in World War I airsoft that I thought it might do.
Yeah, because you'd have thought with Battlefield 1 as well, there'd have been a bit of a, there's enough time.
Don't get me started on Battlefield 1 and realism.
But at least it raised awareness. It brought guns out that people hadn't otherwise seen, and there's been a long enough lag now that you would have thought manufacturers would have brought those guns out to suit those needs. But we still don't have a Hellregal, so what the hell?
I was going to say we haven't had the same lone survivor effect.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of goes hand in hand. So, and this is a little bit off topic of custom guns, but it's probably why people do make custom guns. But people will look at a film, people will want that product. If that product's immediately available, they'll buy it and incorporate it into their loadout, and then they post that on UK Airsoft community, and 1,500 people comment on it and say how cool it is. A few more of those people go and buy that gun, and then the cycle continues. Yeah. So people probably look at World War One and think, oh, that's actually kind of cool. One in probably 10 people that would find modern kit kind of cool will go, that's kind of cool. I'll buy it. Oh, where did you get that from? Actually, it's really hard work. Oh, well, that's inaccessible to me. I'm not really going to be interested in that. I've just got distracted by buying the gun that's in Call of Duty now because I'm getting drowned out by mainstream media.
Well, I've had I've had some of that with my retro ARs. People are like, where'd you buy those? So you can't. You have to make them. All right, where'd you make them from? GMP receivers, which don't exist anymore.
Yep.
Oh, right.
I think
that really sucks, doesn't it? You know, what a great message to be able to tell people.
I just see their crestfallen faces going. Oh.
We kind of run out of Airsoft ran itself into a dead end. Like the Airsoft manufacturing and Airsoft collecting kind of ran itself into a dead end because I sort of think it's because of the commercial firearms industry in the US as well, because that's something that's really peaked in the same time that older school stuff has kind of dived a little bit. I mean, it's wobbling underneath, but like the commercial side of things, I've been recently looking into stuff that like Strike Systems make, and Strike Systems used to make quite a lot of like Airsoft stuff, but they recently dropped all of their Airsoft stuff, and now they're making what is pretty much Airsoft stuff, but for real guns. So that's then going to show up on a few real guns. There's going to be a few influencers using new products. Like when I say influencers, I mean real firearms users. You know, the guys that you kind of look to, and they're the real top of the pile. So maybe I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm also kind of developing this idea in my head. So these guys are using new cool stuff, and obviously it's their prerogative to use new cool stuff because companies are hitting them up to say use this new cool stuff. They're also trying to attract a view base because they need to use new cool stuff, and it kind of self-perpetuates its cycle. So they're all using this new cool stuff, forgetting about this core of old cool stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, once they've run out of new cool stuff that they can't keep promoting, there's guys like Forgotten Weapons, and I mean even Garand from. He's also tipping back into a few of the older bits and pieces.
Nine Hole Reviews did the Gary Gordon carbine recently, which was one of their most successful episodes.
Yep. The SPR one's pretty good as well.
The SPR, yeah. So the stuff's there. I think the love's still there. I've sent some 3D printing files and a couple of bits and bobs over to some Airsoft influencers in the States because they're making Delta builds, 90s Delta builds. So it's ticking, and I think as soon as those guys start as you said, Ben, as soon as those fairly big influencers start posting their builds, people are going to start wanting them, and that's
So I've got this theory, and it might be a little bit risque for me to say it, but I've got this theory that kids that get into hobbies, and I say kids in the most respectful way, kind of get into the fashionable thing, and for the last few years the fashionable thing has been guns, cool guns. Call of Duty, Battlefield, they've been back-to-back in releases, like Rainbow Six and things like that.
13
they've been
hours.
Back-to-back in.
13 hours is responsible for a lot of plaid, he says, wearing one himself.
It's responsible for a lot of things.
I think we're all but like gun releases. So kids have got into like gun games, Fortnite and things like that. They've been back-to-back in these like AAA games and film titles for a little while. It's all been about guns and things like that. But I was kind of calling it maybe 18 months ago. It's not going to be too long before a different vibe comes along and like skateboarding or something comes in to vogue. And like totally off topic, it's 21 years ago since the X Games was so popular that Tony Hawk was doing his 900 and everybody was watching that and wanted to go and buy a skateboard. But it's kind of coming back now. Like EA have announced that they're going to be doing skateboarding again. So I think a lot of the mainstream vibe might actually get pulled away again because skateboarding and stuff like that's got fashionable, and then Airsoft will go back down to its core of like slightly older farts like us lot that are interested in like really labouring over our purchases and really buying things with a bit of a historical vibe to it.
So talking about historical vibes, I'm going to sorry, Web, I'm going to cut you off a bit because I want to move the stream on a bit. Ben has also got another rifle, which is your Gewehr 43.
Yep.
Should we talk a little bit about that, and then we'll look at tying up the episode with some final thoughts.
Yeah, go on then.
So what's the basis for this madness?
Well, like I said, I like World War II airsoft, and I've got the US World War II airborne, but I also quite like the dark side because they have cookies and Lebkuchen. So and good Weiss beer.
So I've just chucked a full photo up.
Right. So yeah, I decided that I was gonna do a German kit as well. Now I have dabbled with German kits in the past. I did just a generic infantryman with a. What did I have back then? It was a Marussian Kar 98K 8mm shell ejector.
Oh wow, yeah.
And that was quite spicy as well, actually, to be fair, in hot weather, because the barrel was this long, and it was using green gas and 8mm .48 or something like that.
Oh, it was mental, those things.
Are they actually like bullets for reloading purposes or something like that?
Yeah. So yeah, that was quite good, and then I went to the even dark side and did a Waffen SS loadout.
They've got the best uniforms.
Well, yes and no, but I just it got a bit, I don't know, it got a bit too fruity. So I got rid of the Waffen SS thing because I don't know, it wasn't worth the stigma of it, and there were certain elements that that don't really bear discussing on a
family show,
on a YouTube family show. But anyway, so I dispensed with that, and now I'm back at the German thing, doing a Gebirgsjäger, mountain troop,
right.
Probably 5th Mountain Division. So that's actually a real unit, and they served in the Eastern Front and in Italy and like southeastern France towards southeast France. Anyway, yeah, mostly Eastern Front and the Italian Front. And I wanted a semi-automatic weapon because having owned an M1 Garand, I knew the value of a semi-automatic weapon. So the G43 was the one to do, and as far as I'm aware, the only other G43s that are out there are the custom ones. There's some really good ones being made by Sleeper Shark Customs. He's based in Ireland. There's a guy called Mick Holden, and he does some really, really good AEG ones based on the M14 version 7 gearbox. But he fabricates the upper receivers and everything out of metal. I'm not sure how he does it exactly, but he's got some pretty detailed plans, and they look spot on.
Yeah.
So they're great, but like I said before, normal AEGs bore me a little bit, so I went down the gas blowback route. So I have a gas blowback G43. Woohoo! And I wasn't going to pay $1,400 for a showy air blowback one, which, whilst they are like a 1-to-1 spot-on replica, they're just a bit crap. They get about 200 FPS.
We'll go back to that previous discussion, aren't we? It was never really intended as a
bit bum.
Yeah. It was one of them. So I decided that I would build my my Gewehr 43 out of aim top SVD Dragunov.
Okay.
And so the basis for this is that unlike the M1 Garand, which has got an ICS buttstock, and a real M1 upper and lower handguards. So they're like walnut handguards. I had to make the stock and handguard for the G43.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's not
scratch.
a massive amount of Gewehr 43 stocks and handguards kicking around.
There's a company in where are they? Poland? Is it Poland or is it? I think it's Poland. Called Fox Military that make replica stocks, but they are 350 quid
Right.
before you even start.
Okay, yeah.
And the problem with that is though that they might not be suitable for the Airsoft internals.
Of course.
So my stock, whilst it's the right shape, it is wider than a real stock, and it's slightly deeper as well.
Yeah.
Because of because a real G43, the barrel sits very low in comparison to the top of the receiver, whereas the SVD barrel sits slightly higher up. So I've got a slightly deeper belly on my stock.
So you'd end up spending 350 quid on something. One
No,
might not fit, and you might have to carve up anyway. So you made your own woodwork, I'm guessing.
So I spent 47 quid on plywood, and 47 quid on plywood and 45 quid on a mini palm router, and I just routed it out and sandwiched the pieces together. So it's a proper plywood. It's
Is
birch
that
plywood laminate stock.
Is that true to the original ish as well?
Yeah, the original ones used laminate stocks.
Okay.
And yeah, it's the same shape and everything, and it does the job. I had to fabricate the front barrel band entirely from scratch. So that was aluminium tube and mild steel, because the barrel bands, again, I could have bought a real one, but they're about 80 quid, I think. 80 quid for a real one, a replica anyway. And again, it wouldn't fit because it's made to fit real stock. And of course, there is no other replica, so I had to completely fabricate the upper receiver, bolt carrier, and bolt carrier cover. And I used your method, the same method you used on the Ops silencer, as 3D printing. So I just took some rudimentary measurements off of, I printed out some pictures from the internet, found out the overall length and length of certain parts, and did everything to scale. So I had a scale, but of course, fitting the airsoft part, so I had to modify the scale again. So it's it passes the 12-foot rule.
Well, I always think the 12-foot rule is eminently sensible when it comes to these things, which is particularly for skirm. If you're doing living history, maybe not so much, but for airsoft skirmishing, and it makes life a lot easier.
I've seen a couple of comments about an FG42. That's the paratroop rifle. Yeah. That would be a cool GBBR. Yeah, it would. I mean, I think making a gas blowback FG42 would be more probable. It's probably not the word, but easier than trying to fit a gearbox into an FG42 receiver, because the receiver in an FG42, for a start, your pistol grip is right underneath your ejection port, which is also right next to your magazine. So you've got your magazine right next to your pistol grip.
And they did that. They did that to make it shorter. Hence why to make the whole thing shorter in the first place, because you can save yourself 20 centimeters if you smash it all on top of each other.
All together, yeah. That's a very, very, very well thought out and clever rifle. I know that it's Gun Jesus Ian from Forgotten Weapons, and even Larry Vickers raved about it being really good. Can handle 8mm Mauser on full auto really well. But an airsoft version is doable. I mean, there's a company called Northeast who have released a gas blowback Sten gun.
Yeah.
And that uses side-mounted gas blowback magazines.
It does leak like a sieve, though.
It does leak. It does leak, yeah.
But all these things can be overcome, yeah.
It is doable, yeah. I mean, maybe if this magnetic solenoid thing comes out, we might have an FG42 out of it as well. But yeah. So those are the two custom guns that I've poured a lot of time, effort, money, and actual blood into as well. Yeah.
It always matters more when you've bled over stuff, doesn't it? It's one of those classic things.
So I think I need to go back to something.
Go for it.
I did want to mention earlier on, but I got kind of sidelined by some warbling socio-political rant about their trends and stuff like that.
It was really interesting, Ben. It
was good. It was good. It was insightful.
Tend to get a little bit of a vibe on sometimes, but so custom guns and what makes a custom gun and what makes a custom gun recognizable. Like, there's a lot of ARs out there, Tom. With all due respect to your ARs, to the layman, they'll be looking at them and saying that's just an M4, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and the L119 crew will probably be getting fucking frothy about this as well. It's just an M4, isn't it? And most people don't recognise it as a custom gun. And as far as custom guns go,
L119 Master Race.
The AR platform is pretty easy to customise compared to most others because at its very most fundamental, it was made to be modular, wasn't it? It was made to be switched and changed, and it could accept different bits and pieces, and just the way the barrel bolts on and the way the fore ends and stuff stick together and stuff. It's probably had more time spent on it being modular. So a custom AR is probably one of the easier ones to get involved in. I know that the intricacies of the details and stuff like that are very, very deep, and I think there's a whole church of people that are really, really into custom ARs that are probably more detail oriented than any other group of people. I know Dan, he's commented in his ATRG, is just saying no one's doing decent wannabe articles on newer films, and I think the wannabe kind of side of things, and I'm sure that's a phrase that my former employee probably stole off of somebody else and made into his own. But the reason why people aren't doing newer stuff is because it is not obviously and explicitly custom or doesn't require any work. Like loadouts these days, the modern Special Forces loadout is a cop-out. I'm sorry to everybody, and I'm guilty of getting involved in it as well, but it's a bit of a cop-out because everything's commercially available. You really don't have to go very far to find all the bits and pieces. You just have to dig deeper into your wallet. And to build the gun, there's a few bits you have to do, like especially if you want to get involved in an L119A2, but it's got enough of a following for it to be doable. It just requires money throwing at
There's
it.
a process. There's a process with the L119A2, which I'm going down. I've collected all the bits. I've got the list. I've got all the bits. It's now gone off to LC, who's doing the trades and the receiver mods. It's going to come back and I'm going to put it together. So it will be a custom gun, but it's certainly not it's not a. And I've done the research, so I haven't had to pop up on the forums and go, "How do you make one?" You know, I've read all the stuff. I've not annoyed people. But you're right. It's a process, and you start here and you throw money at it until you come out the other end.
Yeah. If you were going to keyword a modern Special Forces loadout from any Western nation, multicam M4, you know,
416,
OpScore helmet, 416, AR pattern weapon. That's pretty much what you need, the boxes you need to tick. And I think that's probably why people aren't so frothy about doing loadouts now, is because real world loadouts have become commercially dominated and also very, very samey. I mean, that's great because all the kit they're using is really, really good, but do you really need to build a super custom gun to make that loadout? Like, to somebody looking in from the outside, it doesn't have to be that custom. It's still got that outline from 12 foot away. Yeah, as you were saying earlier on, it's just a fucking M4, isn't it?
Even then, you could put an angry gun front end on.
Yeah,
and to most people, that's probably good enough.
You've achieved your 12 foot thing, and that's that. So maybe that's why. And as Dan ATRG says, no one's doing these newer loadouts. No one's doing this newer custom stuff. Is because the newer stuff doesn't really require that customization. And I mean, it's a long time since anybody really built a brand new weapon system that got adopted by anybody, isn't it? That the weapon system isn't just a hodgepodge of various different aftermarket parts.
Probably not going to happen until there's a caliber change now.
Yeah.
And it's also another thing that's happened is a lot of the major weapon manufacturers have now gone. So there's only really SIG Europe have just gone. There's only really SIG USA and HK left, and they're making their products, and that's what they make.
The last thing they rolled out was like the HK433, but I don't think that's really been picked up by anybody.
It's that was a response to we're saying numbers again. That was a response to the Germans saying the 416 was too expensive.
Yeah,
and they're probably
we can make it cheaper.
They're probably just going to be buying the 416 anyway.
Yeah. It's so I think that's probably why there's a bit of a dearth of imagination in modern stuff, like maybe the last decade or something. Maybe we'll see a big boost in like custom guns, and maybe it's just given the airsoft industry, the replica industry, a chance to catch up on this whole kind of 20 years of stuff that hasn't been made. I mean, there's still some classics that haven't been brought to life, isn't there? There's, I can't think of one now. Predictably, I can't think of a single one, but there's still some stuff that never got made into a mass production gun.
The Enfield number 4. SMLE.
We still need a good mass production number 4 or yeah. We really
brain gun, proper brain gun. What else do we need? We could do with I don't know. We could do with like maybe a mass 36 for the French impressions. I know there's quite a few guys that have made their own mass 36s. Again, 3D printing and using real furniture parts.
That'd be cool.
Do you know what I really want to make? I really want to make an MG42. Now, they exist, but I want to take a Daytona blowback system, dump it into an MG42, and run the HPA line into an ammo tin.
Yeah,
that's what I want to do.
Is that the next project?
No, I think the wife wants a new kitchen first before I do that.
Talking of running into an ammo tin, bear with me a moment.
Oh, Captain Slackbadders. Captain Slackbadders off.
Ammo tin time.
Or he's going for a beer.
Oh yeah, actually, I'm kind of out of I need a new ammo tin as well, to be fair. But
yeah, it's one of those things, and again, but there's always commercial pressures in this stuff. So this is where
you've got to make something that people will want, because otherwise, what's the point? You just, shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, because those 20 World War II French reenactors would really like a MAS 36.
Yeah, they would.
But
I'd really like one as well. To be fair,
but there's only 20 of them, so it's one of those.
See, I'd get one, but I'd do a French paratrooper from Dien Bien Phu,
with the folding stock and all that.
Well, yeah, could do the folding stock one. But what else?
I'm back.
I'm trying to think. I'm sure that the comments will be full of. Somebody's mentioning an SLR already, but I believe that VFC are making a gas blowback SLR.
At some point.
Only LCT.
We want an LCT one, don't we, Ben?
Yeah.
I'd like an LCT one with a blowback in it that doesn't blow the front end off of the weapon.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you've seen my fairly recent video on LCT recoils, it's not. Yeah. The EBB system is, it makes a great noise, but you tend to get that when you smash two bits of metal together at 20 times a second. So
you might as well have. I was going to say, you might as well have a retinue behind you with some coconuts.
So just turn it over to the comments. What would you like to see? We're going to start winding up. So if you've got any questions for the guys while they're here, please drop it in the comments. And if you've got some ideas for custom guns you would either like or you'd like to see made, drop those in the comments as well. Sorry, Ben,
do you think it's a custom gun if it's not a military weapon?
I think it can be. I mean, you can get. I don't think it. Well, guns are guns at the end of the day. They shoot bullets. Their primary function is to inflict damage upon something at a distance. I don't think it matters if it's military or not. Well, it could be law enforcement.
Yeah, You can always. There's the thing about British Airsoft being. Say it again, the acting out of military and law enforcement scenarios for the purpose of recreation. you can always be quite loose about what a law enforcement scenario is, particularly what's
Well,
going
it
on
could
going on
be-
in several countries in the world at the moment. You know, people have got any old stuff that they're running around with.
It could be what they call it, cowboy fast action, gunplay, that kind of thing. I had a Tanaka single action army that I used at an airsoft game a couple of times. Not realizing quite how powerful it was with the Pegasus system in it. It was made a few people squeal, and I put it away afterwards. What else is there? Well, there's post-apocalyptic games as well.
Yep.
Which could be anything. Pick up a frying pan and go to town. Especially if you're into the LARP side of the role playing element of airsoft, which I know that well, I gather we are. Play a role.
Remember Airsoft. When Airsoft comes back, that's what you're going to be into.
Well, you're in,
oh yeah.
Well, you're in,
Yeah.
Have you filled out your Sand Lion DPS application form yet?
Yeah. Recruiting now, by the way.
For our PSD, our fictional PSD company that we're now running for airsoft games. How are we doing in the comments?
Somebody's mentioned SIG 550. Yeah, that would be good.
The HK 33s.
What would Stoner do? Would be awesome using GBBR. Good old Tanaka revolvers. Burst function is a popular thing on out-the-box rifles now. Yeah.
I think we're spoiled for choice when it comes to normal, off-the-shelf guns. I think there has been more niche guns in the last few years that have made it out into the market than a while back. Is that true or not? Am I just being rose tinted there? Because there used to be a lot of weird stuff about back in the day, but
Maru used to do loads of weird stuff, but it was all made of plastic and was rubbish. But it's kind of
you've got Maruzen. Was it Maruzen that made a Mateba? Revolver with a barrel at the bottom of the cylinder rather than at the top. Tanaka used to make some fantastic, SIG series pistols like 220s, and their 226 was sought after as well. Like loads of Novak commanders and things like that. All these different handguns.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, there's an interesting comment that's come up from a guy called Nick in the YouTube comments. It said a gas blowback Bren 805 would be cool with 2-shot burst, and I know for a fact that would be cool. However, if you've got to throw probably 400,000 pounds at making that gun as a production item, it would be cool. Would that be enough? Because the Brens are great, and I know the people that have got Brens are really loving them, but they've been a real slow burn for the company that I work for, ASG. And that's partly because they're difficult to make. They're actually quite an expensive gun and a time-intensive gun to make. It's a really big, long, extruded piece of metal.
Yeah.
And people at the time, there's just not the volume of sales there on a gun that costs that much to really inspire a big company. Let's be honest, all big companies are in airsoft to make money. They don't want to be making production guns to make a loss. So a gas blowback Bren would be cool, but it's the sales of the AEG Bren may not support that in comparison to other things. So lots of companies, and it's the only sensible thing to do when you're making big investments. You can't go making massive gambles, because when you do, your company goes bust and we never get anything out of it.
Scott Allen from Land Warrior always says, if you ever listen to your customers, all I would ever stock is obscure gas blowbacks. And then no one would ever buy them.
Yeah.
Ooh, somebody just said a gas blowback SKS.
Yeah, I'd be all over that.
Yes. An SKS.
I think that could do quite well.
Unfortunately, again, because there's what, a good few people watching now, but I reckon we're probably those people that represent the minority of the market.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we've been into airsoft that long. We represent a very, very small minority. And, if I go to ASG, to one of our meetings over in Denmark, there's a list as long as my arm that I will reel off of projects that they should do because I know they'll be interested in them and it will be great. But they're like, dude, we've got to make some money off of this. Like, your salary comes out, and we all have to live off of this. And it sounds horribly corporate, but it's really not. Like, it costs money to make airsoft guns, and over time, you can make a gun that's got a good bit of appeal, and it sells a lot, and it's got enough volume, and it's the right thing. But you've got to make like 2 or 3 of those to generate enough money in the coffers to be able to justify making that one thing the engineers probably really, really want to do. It's probably the same for Ford. Ford, like, guys come up to engineers at motor companies and say, can you make this gun? Can you make this car? They probably don't ask them to make guns. Can you make this car? And they said, we'd love to make that car. Like, we've been sketching out that car and prototyping bits in our spare time for the last decade. However, it's not going to make any money, guys, because like 4 people are going to buy it because it's not very practical.
It's partly why they do concept car stuff, to give the engineers and the designers just a bit of a run out.
Yeah.
And then they get some publicity. Get some publicity at motor shows. That's always worth doing. So you see it as a marketing cost. You get like vaporware, and if you've ever been into road cycling or mountain biking, you get vaporware. So they announce a bike that they'll probably sell one of, and they know they're going to sell one of, but it gets into the magazines and it gets out into social media.
It's funny you should mention that, because somebody's going back to the comments about the FG42. Somebody's saying gas blowback and would it be doable, and us discussing that yes it is. It was back end of 2018, I think it was. S&T, who make K98 and 1903 Springfield, they released a picture of World War II era stuff. So they had a Bren gun on there. They had an SMLE. They had they had a Japanese machine gun.
Yeah, they had
Type 97.
And they had an
Type
SKS
97
as well.
LMG. They had an SKS and they had an FG42, and that was gas blowback. It's 2 years later.
Yeah, it's probably just an engineering product.
Probably
engineering project that they never just wasn't commercial, or they just did it to let the engineers not go mad.
Do you guys think it's actually inspiring to see these things, or actually a bit demoralising to see them and never come to life?
It's disheartening, to be honest.
To not see them come into fruition.
You think, oh yes, finally somebody's actually done something about it. Somebody has listened to the 20 people who asked for it and have decided to build it, or it's going to happen, and then it falls flat on its arse.
So Nick's just said, sorry guys, the reason Ben, Nick's just said the reason Ben just outlined applied to a lot of real steel firearms too. Companies seeing interest, tool up, and then no one actually buys them when they're like $6,000 because they have to be.
Yeah. Case in point, Tokyo Marui AA12. For so long, so many people, AA12. As soon as an AA12 comes along, I'm going to sell my sister, and my nan's going in a home so I can buy an AA12. And then when the AA12 came out,
it's a bit boxy, isn't it?
It's £550. It's just a big square bit of plastic, and it's 550 quid. And everyone was like, yeah, probably not going to get one of them. And it's got some support, but Marie are probably like, fuck's sake, we're never listening to social media ever again now.
No, don't.
Because I say it's a little bit like the Mark 46 that they've released recently.
Yeah. Where's Phil? Phil, you'll summon Phil Bucknell if you say that.
that thing is...
Say into a mirror 3 times.
I've had a girl now. Yeah. It is awesome.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, it's awesome, but is it... how much is it? Is it $1,000 awesome?
1,200. It's no better than a standard recoil, but it is a Mark 46.
It is a Mark 46.
But if you're into that, and if you're into immersion or milsims and ammo limits and fantastic.
Exactly.
Which probably,
I do genuinely think it's a very dangerous game for Marui to play, to invest quite so much money into very, very niche appeal weapons, because these are the things that us custom enthusiasts, I say us custom, I haven't made a custom gun for some time now. Like, I haven't had the time or the inclination to do it, but I know Ben's been at it, you've been at it, Tom. Maybe they're best left with guys that really, really want to do it, and then because the big companies have got to turn over a lot of.
Yeah.
It's not cheap to mass produce these guns.
Tooling
We've
is
said it ourselves.
Tooling's expensive.
It isn't cheap to build these bits that we need for these guns. So maybe we kind of do have to pioneer it, and we do have to prototype them. We do have to build up a bit of a. Maybe it's in our hands. I know that sounds really cheesy and shit like that, doesn't it? But maybe that's how we find what is really going to have a bit of traction in the market.
So most things prove the market. When I was a product designer, we had to go out and, before Games Workshop would commit to spending money on tooling for a thing, we had to go and prove that it would be worth doing. We made some quite expensive things when I was there, and we had to really make sure that it was justified, because otherwise you're committing to £100,000 worth of tooling to make a product. You really need to know that there's going to be a market. Sometimes you take a punt because you can't quite. Sometimes you have to be a bit secret, but you can ask the right questions to enough people to give you the confidence that there's a need for what you're trying to achieve, for what you're trying to do. And it's very difficult in the airsoft world. And if you ask people directly what they want, you won't get the right answer. You have to get a feeling for what they actually. There's a difference between needs and wants, and people will tell you what they want, but you need to give them what they need, and that can be quite a difficult thing.
I think what I need to do now is make an MG34 out of a Marui Mark 46. Thinking about it.
I just heard the bank account explode, I think.
That's your wife. That's your wife breaking everything downstairs because she wants a kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't my bladder bursting for once.
Cool. I think I'm gonna start winding up the stream. So, if any last comments want to come in the meantime, I'm going to thank my guests, Ben and Ben. I think I've managed to not call Ben Webo and Webo Ben and Ben Toasty and Webo Tart or something. I don't really know. Thanks to Will Greenwood for squawking in the background as well. Much appreciated, Will. Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys. That was a really popular stream. I'm really pleased actually. Well, these won't be weekly because I need to find a good topic, and two, now the range is open. I'm back editing, and I'll be as soon as I get to a game, there'll be more stuff to do. But when we've got a good topic and we've got good guests, we'll bring live stream. I'll probably stick to this slot. It doesn't interfere with too many other people's live streams. So that'll be Wednesdays at 7:30-ish, depending on guest availability. So big thank you to everyone in the stream. Thanks for turning up. Big thanks to Ben and Ben again. And we'll see you next time. Everyone,
thanks very much.